Today on the church calendar is either the final Sunday of Epiphany or Transfiguration, depending on how you look at it. The Transfiguration story that you just heard gets its own day. It's important. And there's a famous American preacher who, by the way, is deservedly famous. He really is quite awesome. I was reading the other day that he once said that it's best to not preach the Transfiguration story, but instead to simply remind people of the wonder of God in the revelation of Jesus, and praise God for that moment. So our next hymn is number 82 in Voices United. I'm just kidding, don't even think about it. You know when I say it's best to not talk about this, is I'm going to talk for a while, right? So get comfortable. Listen, here's the thing. I find it hard to believe that the Jesus who says, "They will know you are followers of mine by how you love them," would also then go, "Look at me. Worship me." And here's a fairly critical problem with the Christian church generally. We're supposed to worship God and live like Jesus. Not worship Jesus, but live like Jesus. You know this is true because you just heard it in this story. In a moment in which the disciples literally fall to their knees and say, "Hey, how can we mark this moment and keep not just Jesus, but Moses and Elijah right here and hold on to this moment and worship them? Let's build little temples. Let's set up some little buildings so that they'll stay. And then we can worship them." And Jesus goes, no, we're not doing that. Thank goodness we then hear the voice of God going, "Listen to him," because who knows what the disciples might have done instead. But the point is that you can't stay with that moment. It's got to go somewhere. And it does. They go down the mountain. The shining moment, the shining light of Jesus isn't there to be worshipped. It's to remind you that to live like Jesus is to shine like that too. It's a great story. I mean, this is a story that's worthy of, in fact, both stories that you heard this morning are worthy of film treatment by Cecil B. DeMille or Peter Jackson, both of whom actually have. But it's a great, fantastic moment, right? Moses, remember in the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston? Come on, you can remember the moment, right? Shining face, comes down the mountain. If you haven't seen the Ten Commandments, what's wrong with you? But it's a big moment because whoever did the makeup in Ten Commandments does a great job. He literally shines. There's a moment in, this is going to be a little dicier. There's a moment in one of the first of the I think it's the first or the second of the Lord of the Rings movies, where Gandalf the Grey appears as Gandalf the White. If you don't know what I'm talking about, find it on YouTube and watch it. It's amazing. But it's a transfiguration moment. They don't know who it is. Gandalf's supposed to be dead. And then there he is, and he's not gray anymore. He's white. His clothes are all white. His hair's white. He's shining like the sun. Sounds like Jesus. And the first thing, of course, that Gandalf does is say, "Let's get on with it." Also just like Jesus. Right, this story, that Transfiguration story, by the way, appears in the three synoptic Gospels, right? The three Gospels that tell the narrative story of Jesus. That's Mark, Matthew, and Luke. And Luke doesn't say what the other two does. In the other two, it says Jesus tells them not to tell anyone. Luke just says they decided not to tell anybody that this had happened. I don't know that there's any particular relevance to either, to be honest with you, although I'm sure there's a whole mass of books that will explain that there is. But the point is that they don't. because the story is not important as what they do. Telling the story of Jesus shining like the sun and meeting Moses and Elijah on top of the mountain is not nearly as important as what happens when they come down the mountain. What's the first thing that happens? Jesus heals somebody. This is also the moment, by the way, in the narrative of Jesus' life in which we turn from Jesus' ministry to heading to Jerusalem and the final week. Luke, in fact, in a few verses later, Luke is going to refer to it as Jesus then turned his face to Jerusalem. So the story's shifted a little bit. The point is, forward. Always forward. It's forward. That's where you go with Jesus. Right? The shining moment can't stay on the mountain. It's got to walk. It's got to go somewhere. And they come down the mountain and they go into what? Living the love of Jesus. The love that Jesus shows. So here they are on the top of the mountain. This amazing thing happens. They see Moses and Elijah. Why do they see Moses and Elijah? Moses and Elijah are the most famous of the prophets. They're there because they represent this moment of Jesus and heaven. Celtic spirituality refers to this as a thin place. You might have heard that expression before, or a liminal moment. It's the moment when the veil, to use a Celtic term, the veil between this world and the next is thinnest. It's a moment in which you might experience God. It's a moment in which you might experience a sense of heaven, like right now. No? Okay, fine. Thank you. But hang on a second, though. Think about that for just a moment. Think about that for just a moment. Why do you come to church? Why do we gather as a community of faith? Yes, an element of that is to praise God. An element of that is to learn. But when you gather as a community of faith, when you go to church, whether that's in a church building or whether that's, at somebody's cottage or somebody's farm or it's outdoors, you're looking for an experience of God. You're looking for not just someone to tell you, God is love, you're loved by God. You want to know that. You want to feel it. You want to experience it. That's what the disciples do. This isn't just a story about, and see, traditionally we've always told this story as, this is in fact the ultimate reveal of Jesus. Right? The season of Epiphany, that's why Transfiguration's at the end of Epiphany. The season of Epiphany is all about stories in which Jesus is revealed. That's what the word Epiphany means. He's revealed. And so it begins with the Magi arriving and revealing that Jesus is the one that was promised. And it ends with this Transfiguration story. Jesus is revealed as the one who is the threshold between heaven and earth. Jesus is revealed. But if all of those stories that we've heard through Epiphany are only about revealing Jesus and not about revealing how Jesus is in you, we're back at Jesus going, look at me. And Jesus never goes, look at me. Jesus is all about, this is you. This is you. If you love the way I showed you to love, this is you showing your love. You are Jesus. It's not just about, and Moses, the story of Moses is from Exodus, like beginning of the Bible, right? And here we are with Jesus, both moments of shining like the sun. But both are moments also about revealing how we encounter God too. Why else would be, going back to the very first, and I'm sure you remember the very first Sunday of Epiphany. What were the first words? In fact, after our traditional acknowledgement of the lands, literally the first words on Epiphany Sunday. The prophet Isaiah, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. Isaiah 60, I think. Don't quote me on that, I'll get in trouble. But the words of the prophet Isaiah, they are the traditional words that open the season of Epiphany. Arise, shine, your light has come. The glory of God is on you. It's not just Jesus that shines. It's not just Moses that shines. It's you. When you live out the good that is in you, when you live out the image of God which is in you, you shine. That's why Jesus doesn't want the disciples to just, we're not marking this moment. We're not staying here. Listen, we're going to go down the mountain. We don't need to share this story with anybody. We're just going to show people what this means. And then they do. And let's be clear, it's not like they're perfect at it, right? What's the first thing that happens when things start to go bad for Jesus and he gets arrested? The disciples run away. They abandon him. Have you ever done that? We probably have. In fact, yes, you have. We all have at some point. At some point, we run away from Jesus. I ran away from Jesus for quite a number of years. That's why I didn't go into ministry until I was late, like 40s. We all have our own way of doing that. The point is that Jesus calls us to shine too. To recognize that everything that Jesus teaches us in how he shows us to love is in you. And when you do that, when you live that, that is your moment to shine. Can you shine every single moment of every single day? No. You could try, though. Don't want to dissuade you from trying. Please feel free to try. But sooner or later, you'll probably have to acknowledge that that wasn't as successful as you wanted it to be. But that shouldn't stop you either. Read all of the stories of Jesus. Sooner or later, I guarantee you will encounter one that will make you go, that was kind of a tough moment for Jesus. That was not the Jesus that was, over in this story over here. You will. It's part of Jesus' humanity. We're not perfect. That's not the point in this world. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to encounter the perfectness of heaven, the presence of God, here. That's what that moment on the mountaintop is. The big reveal isn't just about, here's Jesus. The big reveal is about, here's you. This is you. This is what you are capable of. How do you do that? Well, come on down the mountain with me, I'll show you. What's the first thing that happens in Luke? They go down the mountain and Jesus has to heal someone who's broken. Why? Because the disciples who were down there couldn't do it. They hadn't perhaps yet seen the power that is within them, like the three who went up the mountain did. But then where do we go from there? We go forward. We go into not just all of the love and healing and teaching and preaching and everything that Jesus was doing. We go into that last week of struggle. We go into the story of death and resurrection. And then we go from there with the disciples and with Paul into building communities of faith around this story of how we can live and love together. You too can shine. Not just in this moment, but in moments ahead, you too can shine. The good is in you. Go and do that.